Just about as far back as I can remember, I've been playing video games. One of my earliest memories is sitting on the floor in front of one of those giant tube TVs with wood framing playing Super Mario Bros. Memories of all the past consoles and brilliant games I have played made this list a bit tough to wrap my head around. I could have made a 5-hour video or longer if I was to include every game I have ever enjoyed, but I didn't feel that this was necessary at the moment. As a new content creator, I thought I should introduce myself in a sense by showing my personal taste in gaming as it stands today and show a glimpse of what viewers should expect. Here are 10 of my absolute favorite games and series that have become a staple of my life thus far. As far as fighting games go, Mortal Kombat has been the one to really leave an impression and have me obsessed. In the early days of my childhood, I was a virtual fighter kind of guy, mainly by default. I was simply too young, and my parents would not buy me every single game that ever came out, let alone one as notorious as the brutal Mortal Kombat series. Needless to say, I had a late start with the series. I've rarely been the type of person to go backwards with less mechanically refined titles just to earn my elitist badge and say I'm a real fan. I started proper when I had my own money and seen the first trailer for Mortal Kombat 9, which was basically the start of a reboot for the series. Until this point, fighting games had more or less died off for me, and I kept my attention on other genres. These characters looked so cool and interesting to me, and I became hooked on learning different characters' movesets, running towers, blasting through the storylines, and facing off against online adversaries. As a fan of horror movies, how could I not be swept off my feet by the inclusions of Jason Voorhees, Freddy Krueger, Leatherface, Alien, Predator, and the soon-to-come Ghostface? Stop calling him Scream, you uncultured swine. Also, please give us Pennywise and Pinhead. Imagine the fatalities. I have been die-hard since that 9th entry all the way to the current day of Mortal Kombat 1. My most frequent mains have been Scorpion and Melina, but just about every character is cool as hell in my book. Not you, Johnny Cage. I have never truly understood how you can have all these badass ninjas, godlike beings, and creatures and want to play as the Hollywood movie star. Nonetheless, I enjoy beating the hell out of Cage at any given time with this epic combat cast for now and the many years to come in this fighting game juggernaut. During my short-lived time as an Xbox player, I didn't find many titles that really left a lasting impression on me personally. However, Left 4 Dead 1 and 2 was the apex of multiplayer gaming in my life that stands true to this day. Nothing was better than seeing your friends online or having a buddy come over and just run this game all night long. Couch co-op was particularly great with survival mode. Waves of zombies would rush towards you like a flesh-eating stampede of fuck you, and you had to complete a couple of frantic objectives to successfully survive and exfil. What really stood out and made this game a true masterpiece was the versus mode, where you would have 2 teams of 4 players. You would be going through the game's campaign maps, with one team trying to make it to the safe room as the survivors, and the other team trying to stop you as part of the special infected zombies. Hunters, smokers, boomers, jockeys, spitters, chargers, and tanks all had unique playstyles and abilities which kept every single match so exciting and unpredictable. Playing as the survivors was just as exhilarating, with the many options of firearms and melee weapons that had a devastating feeling of impact with every shot or swing. Not one map I can think of doesn't feel iconic and so masterfully crafted to bring a different vibe and force a different approach. One map, for example, was called Hard Rain, which completely changed the pace you was used to at the halfway mark and turned the circumstances into a frantic sprint through a severe storm you can barely see through. Absolutely heart-pounding fun every single time. What a shame that Back 4 Blood couldn't deliver on this simple but highly effective formula in a way to revive the franchise and bring it to modern consoles. You had one job, Back 4 Blood. One job. If anyone ever tells you that a video game can't be as impactful or emotionally heavy as a movie, hand them The Last of Us and rest your case. These two games have completely redefined what potential that video games are capable of, from voice acting to facial expressions to action and horror sequences. If you have played, you already know how hard to watch some scenes are in a good way. Take the beginning of Part 1, which sets the scene of this apocalyptic hellscape. Joel's daughter dies in his arms, and it's portrayed so well and realistically you can't help but empathize with his pain. The dynamic of the at first apprehensive but gradually growing relationship between Joel and Ellie is truly something special to watch happen. Each supporting character effectively adds world building and a sense of weight to the overall picture. The second game also begins with tragedy and left so many fans divided and furious with some story-related decisions made. Was I sick to my stomach at the sight of Joel being brutally executed? Yes. Did my heart break for Ellie as she helplessly watched his life be taken? Absolutely. Was I a fan of Abby at this point until you end up in her shoes? No, but I wasn't done seeing what the game had to offer. The game is undoubtedly gorgeous and mechanically impressive and smooth. Combat is so satisfying and weighted. I came to find the bigger picture in the later stages of Part 2, and it's not to turn you into a Team Abby player, it's simply forcing you to see that with a path of vengeance and violence, there can be no winners. No good guys or bad guys. Not many people have enough of an open mind to look through the perspective of someone they already declared an enemy. They took a really big chance, and if you ask me, as a combined set, both of these games are nothing short of brilliant and bold as all hell. One of the longest standing series in the stealth genre that has continued to improve and keep giving is Hitman. I started way back on the PlayStation 2 with Hitman Contracts and have played and adored every entry leading up to current day. What this game offers is a very stoic and bald protagonist who was built from the ground up to be an efficient killing machine. He was never given a name but only a number, which can be seen as a barcode on the back of his head. He is referred to as Agent 47. His handler, Diana Burnwood, tasks 47 with assassination contracts on corrupt politicians, drug lords, secret society members, and more in diverse settings. These levels come in the form of large, sandbox-style maps that give the player ultimate freedom on how to approach and complete 47's objectives. You can go in heavily armed and guns blazing, or you can strategically maneuver through the locations as a ghost using disguises to set traps or get up close to your targets for varying ways of deleting them stealthily. Each situation offers multiple cinematic opportunities for epic assassinations, such as disguising yourself as a target's personal chef and serving them a meal to die for, or taking on the role of a prospective client just to get close enough during a meeting to push them over the railing of a skyscraper. The possibilities feel endless, and replayability is the focus. The newest entry is absolutely a love letter to fans by combining all the maps from Hitman 1, 2, and 3 in the World of Assassination trilogy and offering everything in a slick package that's been updated with current-gen graphics. Even new modes, such as monthly changing elusive targets that give you one chance to assassinate a brand new target in a familiar map. Also included is a roguelike mode called Freelance that could be a standalone game on its own. If you love stealth and want the most for your money, look no further than Hitman World of Assassination. Who doesn't want to dress up like a clown and terrorize a suburban neighborhood full of baddies? I can't say I was huge into Old West style media, but I can say I was a massive fan of Grand Theft Auto. I remember having a copy of Grand Theft Auto 3 before I even had my PlayStation 2 because I convinced my parents it was going to be pulled from shelves over ridiculous controversy. When I started playing GTA 3, it felt like something from the future. It felt like everything was possible and the world was my personal playground. I was so immersed in every game leading up to Rockstar releasing a trailer for Red Dead Redemption. Old West GTA with horses was the assumption, and I said, what the hell? Might have fun until the next GTA, and that was an understatement. This game consumed me into its time period, and I became a Western outlaw. I gave up the high-energy cities of GTA for a more grounded and atmospheric old frontier full of lifelike towns and wildlife. Me and my wife would play this game for hours together, literally just going hunting, fishing, or rounding up new horses. It was like a dozen games in one, and fantastic ones at that. I can't tell you how many times I'd load up the game just to sit around a campfire with the gang members and play poker. The second game doubled down on quite literally everything and has become regarded as one of, if not the greatest open world game of all time. The characters are well acted and the gameplay is tight and responsive. The environments bring that sense of immersion where you feel like you can smell the pine in the dense forests or the dust-covered streets of towns. NPCs carry out routines in realistic day and night cycles that can be encountered in unique ways throughout the world. Interactions vary based on your playstyle. You have an honor meter that will go up or down depending on the way you go about playing the game, as either a bad guy trying to be good or a bad guy trying to be worse. The amount of different wildlife you will come across is staggering, and secrets are well hidden throughout the vast landscape. I keep returning to this game not only for the top shelf story, but also just to exist in this so well realized world of the Old West. Not very often have I been sold on a game I didn't know anything about by its title alone, but this first entry of Assassin's Creed managed to pull me in and keep me hooked for many, many years. The first game felt so fresh and innovative for its time, with excellent graphics and mechanics that stood apart from the competition. From badass attire, the hide-in-plain-sight stealth, flashy combat, parkour system, realistically historical locations, to the simple but interesting plot, I was enthralled by everything to do with this game. I had no idea that the game was about to upgrade in a huge way with its following entries: Assassin's Creed II, Brotherhood, and Revelations. We are introduced to one of the most beloved characters in gaming, Ezio Auditore. This character single-handedly took the franchise to the stratosphere with his charm, relatability, and compelling story of revenge for his family, which was publicly executed. Graphics are improved as well as mechanics, and when we get to Assassin's Creed Brotherhood, they introduced a new multiplayer mode. The multiplayer was an intense game of cat and mouse using the core mechanics you have learned throughout your time with the series. You had your pick of several different characters to play as, and each was truly unique in design. Each character had their own unique weapons and aesthetic, which compelled me to use different playstyles depending on who I was. Let's say I got to be my favorite character, the Harlequin. I felt a need to keep a quick and maniacal pace, crossing rooftops and taking out my targets like a frantic psychopath. Whereas if I was playing as the Doctor, I would tend to remain on the streets and be more slow and calculated. Unfortunately, this game mode got worse with each entry, but was never truly bad. It's without question that Brotherhood's multiplayer had a perfect balance of simplicity that was later compromised by the chase mechanic being altered and the identity of each character being taken away and replaced by boring interchangeable weapons like daggers and swords for every character. What a shame that it is gone, but what a ride it was back in the day. The golden era of Assassin's Creed is without a doubt the Ezio trilogy, but titles such as Assassin's Creed 3, Black Flag, Unity, Syndicate, Origins, and Odyssey were all solid entries as well. Cassandra from Odyssey stood out to me as one of the most charming and interesting characters since Ezio. With Brotherhood being the best in the series, in my opinion, they have yet to touch the same magic they once held, but we still have the remastered collections and a few newer entries that aren't exactly terrible. Ubisoft has the formula for greatness, but it seems as of late they have entirely different motives for making games. We can only hope for a true return to form one day. My very first experience with Bloodborne wasn't pretty. It was downright awful. I had always heard how great the game was, and I really liked the gothic horror style aesthetic, so I gave it a go when I got my PS5, and let's just say I didn't even make it to the Cleric Beast. Years would go by, and I finally gave the Soulsborne universe another go with Elden Ring, which led to a platinum trophy and a newfound obsession with that style of game. I finally understood what was expected of me, so it was time to try again with a different perspective. I am one to be quite picky when it comes to game performance, especially frame rate. Bloodborne being locked at 30 frames per second was jarring on my return to the game just as much as my first run. Something was different though. I found myself totally immersed in Yharnam and in awe of the atmosphere and architecture. Battles were going very differently, and I had a handle of the leveling system and weapon scaling. Yes, I had my fair share of deaths, but I could feel the rush of progress as I searched every inch of central Yharnam and beyond. I was actually playing the big, bad, scary Bloodborne, and I was no longer as frustrated as I was motivated to see everything the game had to offer. I felt like an absolute god when I took down the Cleric Beast and Father Gascoigne after only a few tries each. On and on I went, and I was totally addicted to the combat and atmosphere. I hit my next major wall at the blood-starved beast, and I died countless times to his poison attacks. I did start to feel discouraged, but I wanted to experience the rest of the game, so I couldn't give up. Turns out that calling upon a friend to help with a tough fight is absolutely necessary sometimes. So I put my pride aside and did just that. I called upon my more experienced cousin, and we obliterated the beast without too much headache. It was like the game opened up all over again, and I was filled with excitement for what was around the next corner. I went on to complete the game on my own, and even getting the secret final fight with the moon presence. What an amazing game. Time for something else? Absolutely not. I immediately started a new game plus, and it felt amazing being challenged in the early areas of the game all over again. This run felt like somewhat of a power fantasy rather than a struggle. Remember that wretched, blood-starved beast handing me my ass? This time around, I beat him on my own, and the feeling of accomplishment was immense. I continued playing the game until I earned the platinum trophy, and I mostly adored every moment along the way. The Chalice dungeons do become a bit of a grind, but once you do them, you don't need to again, really. I will say, if you are searching for a challenge alone, the Chalice dungeons get pretty crazy the deeper you go. What else can I say that hasn't already been said about this masterpiece of a game? This is absolute peak design, and I still play this game even with nothing further to gain. It's just that good. Remember when gaming magazines were a thing? An issue of Game Informer would be the hook and reel that led me into the world of Resident Evil. I never was too much into horror as a kid, so the earlier titles came and went, and I thought nothing of it. It wasn't until Resident Evil 4 started making waves in magazines and commercials that I would become curious enough to give it a go. I managed to get a copy of Resident Evil 4 around the time of release. After all the media hyping this game up, I was ready. It took me a minute to really get used to the tank controls. The game felt a bit clunky and odd compared to all the other games I have played, but I'm a sucker for atmosphere. I powered through until it was second nature, and it didn't take long. I thought that Leon was one of the coolest characters ever back then, with his cool jacket, one-liners, and devastating kicks that sent villagers flying. Upon getting to the village portion of the early game, shit popped off to say the least. The townspeople were relentless and gaining numbers as I frantically run around seeking ammo and a chance to breathe. Suddenly, a cutscene pans to a man with a chainsaw who has just entered the village, and my heart was pounding. Now doors were being cut open, and everyone was a much bigger threat. I remember being at my absolute last efforts to survive with almost no health and ammo left. Suddenly, the bell rung and all the commotion stopped, and Leon, being Leon, said,
"Where's everyone going? Bingo?"
I played Resident Evil 4 over and over until finally Resident Evil 5 came out, and that was a very different experience and setting, but I still fell in love with it all over again. Resident Evil 6 came around, and let's just sweep that one under the rug. Not for me. Resident Evil 7, through all the remakes, I've enjoyed my time with Resident Evil so much and have made countless playthroughs of each game. The way they managed to be so intense and at the same time weirdly relaxing goes to show how talented Capcom is, especially with this legendary franchise. The gameplay loop, the characters, enemies, music, and even the subtle sound of picking up an herb will keep me coming back to Resident Evil for many years to come. I had already written off Elden Ring to a degree when the buzz was at its highest close to launch. I had a brief encounter with Bloodborne out of curiosity and got humbled to say the least, but essentially came to the conclusion these games were for sweats and tryhards. I didn't get it. I didn't play Elden Ring at launch because I was still playing through Horizon Forbidden West, which I will regard right now as an honorable mention for this list among many others. Upon completing Horizon, after over 100 hours of bliss, I was left with that familiar gamer feeling of, well, now what? You know that feeling that's like a void you don't know how to fill now that the ride is over? People at work were still talking about Elden Ring in a way that struck me. It had been weeks and they were acting as if their journeys were just getting started, and the excitement and mystery of what is next was intoxicating. As I've said before, I've always admired the art style of all of the Soulsborne games, but I couldn't get over the idea of the sheer unfair difficulty. I mentioned to a coworker that I tried Bloodborne, and one of the most discouraging aspects of the game was the fact that if you used health items, they were gone for good. They told me of the flask system and the sights of grace that added just the right touch of forgiveness. I watched a few more trailers and I decided I had to give this a shot. The world just looked so interesting, and as it turns out, it sure as hell was. My first playthrough was around 130 hours of discovery like I had never felt with any other game before. Opening the door to Limgrave immediately struck me to the core as the music kicked in. The atmosphere was incredible. It felt so dark and mysterious, and at the same time unquestionably beautiful and artistic. Combat took hold and made sense fairly quickly and felt very impactful. Just the wonder of the world grabbed me and had me instantly addicted, so I cared about every encounter. I treated every enemy as a massive threat, so fights were exhilarating throughout my playthrough. Yes, I had my fair share of deaths and skill checks, but I never truly felt discouraged. I would simply go in a different direction and hone my skills further, only to return to a tough boss or dungeon and prevail. The new locations continued to pique my interest to my surprise, and it never felt dull or repetitive. I now possess a platinum trophy for the game and a totally new perspective on challenge or difficulty if done correctly. I have hundreds of hours into just one character, and a few others I have started just to properly experience the game with new builds. From the number of different summons, clothing or armor sets, weapons, weapon abilities, crafting items, side quests, and hidden secrets at every turn, I always find enjoyment in returning to the game. Shockingly, I still find new dungeons and items to this day. The game feels like it had to have been in development for the past 40 years by the obvious amount of care that has gone into making this groundbreaking title. Only the people who have yet to experience the marvel of Elden Ring could possibly argue that this isn't one of the absolute greatest games ever made. What a win for RPG fans. I know, yet another list of favorite games ending with Final Fantasy VII, but hear me out. I feel like the overall love for this game is apparent, but the lasting impression the characters and story have left on me is what I can only describe as impossibly special. As a kid, maybe around 9 years old, I was with my grandma at our local mall and I was allowed to pick out a new game. Nothing stood out to me because I just didn't know much of what all I was looking at. As I stood there indecisive, she gave me the signal it was about time to leave if I didn't pick something I liked. In a split decision, I went with the game that had the cool-looking guy with a giant sword looking up at a menacing tower. I didn't know anything about Final Fantasy at the time, nor did I know that the game I was now holding would become the most impactful piece of media in my entire life. Right from the cinematic intro, I was gripped in a way that no other video game had ever achieved. This was nothing like Crash Bandicoot or Tekken. This game had a brooding atmosphere accompanied by an unforgettable cast of characters and absolutely haunting scores of music that pulled you right into the world. My first run of the game was awful since I had never played an RPG before, but also I was fucking 9. This didn't faze me in a negative way at all. I was amazed by the amount of things that I had the option to miss. The world truly felt like it was alive and I could discover anything at any moment. Is this necessarily true from my current perspective? No. Final Fantasy VII is a fairly linear game with a few branching side quests and hidden items. So it's not the sense of discovery that has kept me locked in as a lifelong fan, but its story and characters. I will state that I don't want to discuss major spoilers yet to be seen since we are in the midst of playing the remake trilogy. I am including the remakes along with this entry because in my opinion they have been done with such love and care that I can't fathom being one of these people who won't touch the game simply because the combat is different or they changed the story slightly. They basically did the impossible and not only made the combat the best of both worlds, but they brought the beloved characters to life in such perfect fashion that I can't imagine them being any other way at this point. The materia system is by far my favorite mechanic from any Final Fantasy, and it's even better in the remake since we can level up our materia even with inactive characters. I have set roles for each character in FF7 Rebirth, and it feels incredible to see a well thought out materia set work perfectly during battle. In Rebirth, the side quests are improved tenfold and bring so much character development and special moments to the table that I did every single quest in my first run, clocking in at around 150 hours. I know it seems like I'm going on about the remakes more than the original, but you have to understand, the fact that the remake is done, let alone done very well, is nothing short of a dream come true. The source material is still so important, and I still play the OG to this day. The story and events that play out are just that special to me. It's timeless. During my time with the multiple playthroughs I had as a kid, my grandpa had a stroke and was barely hanging on for years in a nursing home. He went from being the strongest person that I know to being unable to feed himself or speak well. I had moved in with my grandma so she wouldn't be alone during this time. If I wasn't doing schoolwork or trying to cheer up my grandma, I was playing Final Fantasy VII. A game about friendships and loss. It's hard to exactly articulate the way I feel it deserves, but due to the circumstances of life at the time, it never felt like I was just playing a video game. I wasn't in pure isolation with my dread and sadness. I felt like I was actually there with these characters experiencing my own side of the story. Eventually the time come and he passed. This was really my first time experiencing loss to this magnitude. This was sort of reflected at the same time by the sudden death of Aerith Gainsborough. It was shocking initially, but as life goes on, the struggles and conflicts within the game have continued to affect me on an emotional level. Not in a terrible or unhealthy way, I would say. More so in a way of remembering what all I've been through in life with these characters. I have done my best to describe what this game means to me, and maybe it's fine, maybe it's rambling or hard to understand. All I know is that deep down I will never be able to put into perfect words the lasting impact Final Fantasy VII has had on me. You either get it or you don't. I'm fine with people thinking the game is just okay or even bad. It's on a deeply personal level that I can say without a doubt, Final Fantasy VII is my favorite game of all time. Be sure and let me know in the comments what your favorite games of all time are. I'm always down to chat it up about the best of what the industry has to offer. I appreciate you for watching, and I will see you on the next video.